The machines in my hospital room beeped in a slow, steady rhythm, as if they were more patient than I ever was. I lay there, staring at the beige ceiling tiles, each one stained slightly differently by age and time. The smell of antiseptic was strong, not because I was particularly sensitive, but because there wasn't anything else left to distract me. No flowers, no family, just the hum of machines, and a phone sitting next to my bed, still plugged in, still ignored. My chest rose and fell with effort. I wasn't unconscious anymore, but I wasn't exactly awake either. Not the kind of awake where you expect life to keep happening. I was between something: life, death, relevance. I'd just come out of surgery, something to do with my heart. Fitting, really. It's the kind of organ that keeps going even when everything else has stopped trying. And then, the phone buzzed. I turned my head. The effort alone made my ribs burn. It lit up with a name that still meant something at the time. Mom. No mama, no ma, just mom, cold and correct. I reached for it with trembling fingers. No notifications before this. No how are you. No calls. Just one message, blinking on the screen. You'll die anyway. Give your sister the house. I stared at it, then again, and again. I reread those 13 words until they burned through the screen and into my skull. No hello, no hesitation. Just a sentence that split my soul open. My throat closed. It wasn't from the anesthesia or the oxygen line. It was from something worse. Betrayal that came so easily, so casually. I whispered to no one. I didn't die from surgery. I died from 13 words. This wasn't the first time she made me feel small, but it was the first time she wrote it down. Final. Absolute. A declaration of death from someone who still had the gall to call herself my mother. And for what? So Belle could finally get something without earning it. You fight death, not your family, I muttered, tears not falling. But what if your family chooses death for you? I closed the message, but it didn't stop ringing in my ears. My thoughts wandered, not to the wound on my chest, but to another wound entirely, one that began 5 years ago when I bought that house. It wasn't much to look at. 2 bedrooms, low roof, crooked fence. But it was mine. I saved for that place one late night at a time. I skipped vacations. I cut my own hair. I worked double shifts and ate cold sandwiches in my car. Every penny I put into that house felt like claiming a piece of myself. When I told Mom about it, she didn't say, "Congratulations." She said, "Are you sure you can afford that?" Belle, of course, laughed from the background. That's all I got. It wasn't a mansion, but it was the only place where I wasn't just somebody's afterthought. Belle was always nearby, always present, always praised. She stayed behind, helped Mom when she got sick, dropped groceries off on Sundays. She was the good one, the dependable one, the one who was there. And that made me what exactly? The ghost daughter, the disappointment who bought a house out of selfishness? They called Belle a caretaker, like she was Mother Teresa. Never mind, she lived rent-free for a decade and treated my mother like a queen when I wasn't around. Presence, apparently, was more important than effort. Proximity isn't love, I once said, but in our house, being near was enough to be the favorite. Now here I was, broken ribs, stitched sternum, IV in my arm, and the only thing that made it through the hospital walls was a text telling me to give up the one thing I ever fought for. My heart didn't break from surgery. It broke from the realization that they'd been planning this. For how long? Had they been circling my property like vultures while I lay sedated? I imagined it, Mom calling Belle from the porch saying, "She's not coming back. Let's handle it now." I could see them in my living room, sorting through my things, arguing over who gets the recliner, who gets the garden tools. And me? I was already gone in their eyes. The machines kept beeping, but they weren't keeping me alive. They were just echoing the silence that had taken over. The people who should have fought for me were already dividing what I hadn't even let go of. The machines were keeping me alive, but the people who should have kept me safe had already pulled the plug. I stared at the message again. Not rage, not tears, just a clarity so sharp it almost cut. "Not yet," I whispered. "Not dead, not done." Sometimes your family doesn't wait for the funeral to bury you. I didn't sleep that night. My body was resting, sure, but my mind kept circling back to that message like it was written in blood instead of text. You'll die anyway. Give your sister the house. It looped in my head, each time a little quieter, but heavier. That sentence didn't just predict the end, it delivered it. The nurse came in around dawn. She didn't say much, just adjusted my IV with quiet hands, checked my vitals, and gave me that polite half-smile nurses are trained to use when they don't want to ask questions. She had no idea my mother had already signed me off like unpaid debt. No idea she'd tossed me in the past tense pile without even visiting. I lay there thinking, what if the betrayal was bigger than that one message? What if the text was just the tip of something that had been planned longer than I wanted to admit? I wasn't dying from the surgery anymore. I was waking up to a life I no longer had a place in. There's nothing lonelier than realizing you're not missed. Later that afternoon, another nurse, different one, younger, sat down beside me during vitals and said, "You have a beautiful home, by the way. Saw it in a post this morning. Your sister's housewarming party?" I blinked. What post? She pulled out her phone, cheerful like someone who thought she was making casual conversation. Opened Facebook, showed me a photo. It was my house, my damn porch, the little chipped bird bath I got from a garage sale. Belle stood in front of it holding a glass of champagne. Mom was in the background, smiling like she hadn't just handed over everything I ever worked for. The caption read, "New beginnings. So proud of you, Belle." I looked at that image like it was a crime scene. No one had told me. No one had waited. I was still hooked up to machines, trying to remember how to breathe, and they were already toasting my exit. I didn't cry. I didn't have the energy to be dramatic. I just stared at the screen, at my porch full of people who had been in my house more recently than I had. Sometime that evening, I opened Instagram. I don't even know why. Habit, maybe. I hadn't posted anything in months. Probably wouldn't again. But I needed to see it for myself. There it was. Belle again, standing on my front steps. Same champagne glass. Same smug smile. But this time, the caption read, "Finally back home where I belong." Back home. Like I had been keeping her from something she deserved. There were comments below, dozens of them. "You deserve this. Couldn't have happened to a better woman. She's always been the responsible one." I kept scrolling. My name wasn't there. My existence, erased like a smudge on a photo, and then I saw it. The doorbell plaque had been changed. It used to say Judd Marsh. Now it said, "The Rail Home." I wasn't even given the courtesy of haunting it. That night, I didn't sleep again. But I did start remembering. Really remembering. Not the warm parts, the patterns, the family brunches I never got invited to. The photos taken without me, always just the local folks. The way my name got left off holiday cards, or how no one ever asked if I was coming. They just assumed I wouldn't. They said I distanced myself. They said I wasn't present. Maybe I wasn't. But maybe I left because I was tired of being wallpaper in my own family. Belle once told me over the phone years ago, "It's not like you ever wanted to be around anyway." At the time, I let it slide. Now, I realized it wasn't just something she said. It was something they all believed. And belief is dangerous. It becomes story. And once it becomes story, it becomes truth. Maybe the story they told about me was easier to live with than who I really was. I didn't cry. Couldn't. It was like my tear ducts finally got the message that this wasn't sadness. It was something colder. Something you survive, not express. They didn't kill me, but they erased me. I wasn't just out of the will. I was out of the picture, out of the memory, out of the family. But something in me didn't break. Not this time. It didn't harden either. It solidified. Quietly. I may have lost the house, but I was still breathing, and they'd have to live with that. I whispered into the dark. So this is what grief feels like, when no one's actually dead. Then I turned off my phone, stared at the ceiling just like before. Only this time, I wasn't defeated. I was still. And I was listening now, watching, waiting. They acted like I was already gone. I hadn't even started speaking yet. It started with a manila folder. The nurse handed it to me during discharge prep, saying, "Just a few things they said you should look over before you go." At first, I thought it was routine, papers I'd signed during admittance, maybe something from billing. My hands were steadier than before, but my chest still ached like it had been cracked open and patched with gravel. I flipped through the folder slowly. There it was, my name on a document I'd never seen before. Property transfer, deed reassignment. My signature. Neat. Fluid. Perfect. Too perfect. I stared at the line that claimed to be mine. It looked exactly like my handwriting. But not like me. Because I knew exactly where I was on the date it was signed. Sedated. Hooked up to lines. Floating in and out of consciousness in a hospital bed. They didn't need me dead, just unavailable. The pen didn't shake, but I would've. I kept flipping, fingers trembling now, not from weakness, but from the slow flood of clarity. Dates, stamps, notarization, all of it processed cleanly, legally, efficiently. They timed it. They waited for the moment I wouldn't resist. One document after another lined up too neatly. Every T crossed, every I dotted. I remembered a nurse saying I'd been sedated for a cardiac MRI on that day. I remembered the fog, the dark, the fluorescent light burning into my eyelids. That's when they struck. I laid the folder down and stared out the window. It wasn't theft. It was orchestration. Later that afternoon, I asked to speak to Dr. Green, the cardiologist I had been seeing for the past year. The nurse blinked, confused, then glanced down at her tablet. "Your attending was switched," she said. "Family authorization. You were transferred to Dr. Jane Toppin-Rivers. She's overseeing your file now." My stomach dropped. Rivers came in an hour later, blonde, crisp. Smelled like cinnamon and protocol. She didn't smile, didn't ask questions, just said, "We'll continue monitoring and move you to recovery shortly." She read my chart like I was already history. I stared at her as she spoke, barely hearing a word. I wasn't her patient. I was her paperwork, reassigned, redirected, decided on without a voice. They didn't just change my status, they changed who got to define my reality. By the time she left the room, I already had the hospital's shared tablet in my lap. I opened the patient portal. It was slow, but I was slower now too, steadier. I dug through my own medical history like it belonged to someone else. Clicked, scrolled, clicked again. My power of attorney had been reassigned, temporarily. On file. Submitted with what looked like my signature. Same handwriting, same slant, same lie. I printed everything. I took screenshots, emailed myself copies, started a folder I labeled cold, because that's how it felt. Cold and deliberate. When I asked administration about it, they said the same thing anyone says when they're complicit without knowing it. Everything was done according to signed paperwork. I nodded, said thank you, walked away. I wasn't looking for apologies. I was preparing my case. That night, before they wheeled me out to discharge, I called a cab and had them stop by a 24-hour storage facility. I rented a unit, bought a lock, bought a cheap laptop, set up a folder inside called Hellfire, and started uploading every document, every email, every photo. I bought a fireproof box and shoved it into the corner. They counted on me being too broken to fight. Let's see what happens when I'm just quiet instead. Silence is underrated. It's the best place to load a weapon called truth. When I got back to my temporary rental, a room in an old friend's basement, I sat on the edge of the mattress, still in my hospital clothes, and turned on the video feed the hospital had reluctantly provided. One of the nurses had confirmed there was a camera in the hallway for patient protection. That's all I needed. I fast-forwarded through hours of nothing. Watched myself, unmoving, barely breathing under a mountain of blankets. Then paused. There, frame by frame, a figure entered the room. Shadows. Belle, wearing a hoodie, accompanied by a man in scrubs. The screen had no sound, just images. The camera didn't catch the inside angle, but it caught enough. Her hand, my wrist, a pen. She didn't just forge my name. She turned my silence into her signature. I was alone when I found it. The discharge nurse handed me a tablet before my last vitals check, asking if I wanted to review anything in my chart. I nodded, less out of interest, more out of habit. Truth be told, I was looking for something, I didn't know what, but I was sure I'd recognize it when I saw it. The portal was slow, the kind that makes you question if the screen froze or if you just aged while it loaded. And then there it was, buried under administrative updates. A note. DNR filed, signed 0418. 2 days after my surgery, the same day I'd been sedated for cardiac imaging. The page said I signed it. I hadn't. My hands went cold. My skin, my breath, everything about me stopped short. I kept staring, rereading it like somehow the screen would correct itself. It didn't. They hadn't just stolen what I owned. They had authorized my end. Not in the dramatic sense, not in a movie kind of way, but in that quiet, efficient, cold-blooded way bureaucracy kills people, just enough paperwork to make it legal. They didn't pull the plug, but they had it ready. Nothing feels colder than knowing someone gave permission for you to stop existing. My next move wasn't frantic, no shouting, no immediate revenge. I just called the one person I needed to hear lie. "Mom," I said, when she picked up. My voice didn't even crack. She didn't greet me with, "How are you?" She just said, "Velma," like I was an inconvenience she forgot to erase. "Did you sign a DNR on my behalf?" A pause. Not silence. Calculation. "Why would you ask me that?" "It's in the system. Dated 2 days after surgery. Your name's listed as medical proxy." Another beat. Then the lie arrived. "I only signed it because they told me you were gone already." Just like that. Like she was doing me a favor. Like she'd carried some unbearable burden and now wanted me to feel sorry for her. "You didn't call me," I said. "You couldn't answer. You didn't try." "Velma," she snapped, voice tightening. "Don't start drama when we've been through enough." Then she hung up. She ended the call before I could finish breathing. That evening, I logged back into the portal, this time from my own laptop. I pulled IP logs, timestamps, device IDs. I'm not an expert, but I'm not an idiot either. The DNR? Signed from Bell's home Wi-Fi. The deed transfer? Same. They didn't even bother covering their tracks. That's how sure they were I wouldn't get up and check. I started downloading everything. PDFs, logs, emails from the hospital's automated system. It was all there. Time-stamped lies. Signatures forged in my silence. They used my coma to create a paper trail. But they forgot I woke up. The next morning, I requested a meeting with the hospital's legal rep. They assigned me someone from patient advocacy. Kind woman. Firm voice. I asked, "Can a person be signed off without consent if sedated?" "If the assigned proxy presents durable power of attorney," she said, "yes." "And that doesn't need live confirmation?" She shook her head. "Only if the document appears valid. That's what determines legality in emergent situations." I stared at her. "So I can be asleep and someone else gets to choose if I ever wake up?" She didn't answer. She just lowered her eyes. They had power of attorney. I had a pulse. Guess which one mattered more? I didn't storm out. I didn't threaten a lawsuit or ask for sympathy. I walked out and bought a composition notebook, the black and white kind kids use for school. I wrote it all down. Page 1, DNR 0418, signed from Bell's IP. Page 2, deed transfer, same date. Page 3, phone call with mom, deflection. By nightfall, I had 10 pages. I scanned every record I had and backed it up on 3 drives. I created an encrypted folder on a cloud server, labeled it Reclaim, and locked it behind 2 passwords no one knew. They built this case like I was already dead. I'll tear it down while I'm still breathing. Around 10:45 p.m., I finally got the hospital's security office to send me the hallway camera footage. I told them I was documenting a discrepancy in staff visits for my own recovery journal. They didn't ask questions. I fast-forwarded through hours of nothing, watching nurses come and go, then paused. There she was. Belle. Entering my room. Hoodie pulled low. Another person with her. Scrubs, clipboard, a nurse maybe, or someone pretending to be. No words on the footage, just movement. Belle leaned over my bed. The man handed her something. Pen. Clipboard. She lifted my wrist. positioned my hand. The screen froze slightly, but not enough. She signed. They didn't just sign my name, they erased my right to wake up angry. The cab dropped me off across the street from what used to be my house. I told the driver I didn't need help with bags. There weren't any, just me, a small folder under my arm, and the reality that I didn't belong to that house anymore. The lawn hadn't changed. The same cracked stepping stones, the rose bush I planted out front, still alive despite everything. But the sign nailed into the dirt read, "Sold," not taken down, not replaced, left there like a reminder or a warning. I walked up to the door, reaching into my purse for my key. I already knew it wouldn't fit, but I had to try. It jammed halfway into the lock, refused to turn. The doorbell blinked. Not the old button I remembered. This one had a camera. Then came the voice. "Hi, this is Belle. Sorry we can't come to the door right now. Leave a message." Not we. She. I looked to the side. The mailbox had a new plaque. The Rail Home. I didn't lose my house. I was locked out of my entire history. I didn't cry, though something inside me buckled. The porch felt smaller than I remembered. My legs heavier. A door I paid for now wouldn't recognize me. As I turned to leave, a familiar voice called out. Mrs. Calwell, from 2 doors down. She was walking her tiny dog, the one that always barked like it paid rent. "Oh, Velma, you just missed the Rail family dinner. It was beautiful," she said, smiling like it was a compliment. I blinked. "Dinner?" "Last night," she said. "Whole family there. Your mom looked great. Belle said you were recovering somewhere peaceful." She didn't mean harm. She was just repeating what she heard. I smiled politely, nodded, then turned and walked away. They set the table for everyone but the one who bought the roof. I didn't know where I was going, but my feet led me down the side yard. Maybe I just needed to see if anything was still mine. That's when I saw the bins. One was marked Goodwill, written in black marker on duct tape. Another had no label at all, just a crack on the lid. I opened the second one. Inside were boxes I'd labeled myself years ago. My handwriting. Dad's cufflinks. College stuff. Old photos. Keep. The lid from one had collapsed, and a stack of prints spilled onto the top. Me and Dad fishing. My high school diploma rolled in a ribbon. The baby blanket Mom said she'd kept all these years. Crushed under a broken toaster and some fake flowers. They didn't pack me up. They threw me out. I didn't touch anything. I didn't take it with me. I just looked long enough to remember it. This wasn't just theft. It was deletion. Later that day, I called the HOA. I figured if I couldn't get through to them emotionally, maybe I could try legally. The woman on the line was courteous, but firm. "Sorry, ma'am. You're not on the registered owner list anymore." I gave her the address, gave her my full name. "I understand," she said. "But the deed was transferred and updated 3 weeks ago. We can't release further info." Even my online utility accounts were gone, reassigned, canceled, changed over. They didn't just cross me off the deed. They deleted my access to the life I built. It was a wall of silence, but this time it had government backing. Every door that once recognized me now acts like I never existed. I sat in the diner across town, hands wrapped around a lukewarm cup of coffee, and called Lane, my friend for 15 years, the only one who might still believe me. She picked up, her voice cautious. "Velma?" "Yeah. Hey." There was a pause. "I thought you weren't coming back." "Why?" "Well, Belle told everyone you gave her the house. Said it was your choice." My grip on the cup tightened. "Did you believe that?" "I didn't want to, but you were gone. She had paperwork." Silence stretched. "I'm sorry," Lane said, voice small. I didn't yell. I didn't explain. I just ended the call. Not out of anger. Out of understanding. The worst part wasn't that they lied. It's how easy it was for people to believe them. That night, I parked across the street again. Looked at my own curtains still hanging in the window. My paint on the walls. My front steps. I didn't cry. I typed. They locked me out. But I still had the code they used to build this lie. I was done waiting for an invitation back in. I went back. One last time. Part of me knew exactly what I'd find, but I had to see it with my own eyes, to confirm whether the pile of things I saw tossed out by the side fence last week was truly what I feared. The bins were still there. The one labeled Goodwill had been shifted open by wind or maybe neglect. Either way, it gaped like a wound. Inside, a photo album, mine, water-damaged, swollen at the spine. I pulled it out and flipped to a page I remembered from childhood. A camping trip. Dad and I by the lake. My picture had been torn clean out. Nothing else. Just an empty plastic sleeve where my face should have been. You don't just throw out a box. You throw out the person it belonged to. That moment didn't crush me. Not the way you'd expect. It settled into me like concrete. That quiet kind of pain that hardens instead of splinters. They weren't getting rid of clutter. They were clearing a name off the story. Later that afternoon, I met Lane at a diner off Route 82, same table we used to sit at when life was simpler, or at least less dishonest. She waved awkwardly when I walked in, like she wasn't sure if I'd show up angry or broken. "I'm glad you're out," she said, sipping coffee. I nodded. She looked around before leaning in. "Belle told us. You signed everything over. Said it was your decision." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Her eyes dropped. I didn't want to believe it, but it's just... a lot of people are saying the same thing. I looked at her like I was meeting her for the first time. "Truth," I said, "isn't what happened. It's what people are more comfortable believing." She reached out to touch my hand, but I pulled mine away, not out of bitterness, but clarity. I left the booth quieter than I arrived, but far less confused. The next morning, I stood in front of the laptop I'd been building my digital archive on and almost deleted it all. The photos, the IP logs, the paperwork. I had this flash, this sharp thought. What if none of it mattered? What if I was just spinning my wheels, trying to scream into a room that had already voted me out? I made an appointment with a lawyer downtown. The assistant was polite. The lawyer was polished. We sat across from each other, and when I told her my story, she listened carefully. But her eyes flickered. The kind of flicker people don't notice giving, but people like me always spot. "You didn't sign anything?" she asked, careful not to sound accusatory. "Are you sure?" It hit me like a replay. High school counselor who thought I was exaggerating, HR rep who dismissed my complaint as miscommunication, family members who said, "Maybe you're just remembering it wrong." I thanked her, gathered my things, and walked out. Not because I lost hope, but because I understood. Justice wasn't waiting in an office. It was pacing inside me. That night, I drove to the storage unit. I kept most of my boxes on a middle shelf, labeled, sorted, and untouched. One box was marked, "Dad, Personal." I opened it, not expecting anything, but inside was a small leather notebook, tattered at the edges, mostly blank, except the last page, his handwriting, heavy, all caps. "This house is Velma's. Don't let anyone take it from her." I didn't cry. I smiled. Not out of joy, but recognition. He wasn't in the photos, but he was still in the story. I scanned the page and slipped the notebook into a zippered bag. Then I opened my laptop and began to work. Every folder, every file, now had a place, one labeled for court, another labeled for me. I wasn't building a lawsuit. I was building a blueprint. If they thought my silence was surrender, they misunderstood the kind I offer. I sealed the printed letter in an envelope, wrote the date across the front, and placed it beside the forged power of attorney copies Belle had filed. Then I sat in the quiet and stared at both. They built their case on a lie. I'll bring it down with a sentence from a man who never lied to me. I didn't tell anyone I was going to see Aunt Carol, not because I needed it to be a secret, but because I wasn't sure what I was going to ask until I saw her face. She opened the door like she'd been expecting me, even though I hadn't called ahead. Same old cardigan, same careful eyes. "You want coffee?" she asked. "No," I said. "I need something else." We sat in silence for a while, her hands folded, mine clenched on my knees. She didn't ask what was going on, didn't need to. She'd always been the quiet one. The one who watched but never spoke unless she had to. After a few minutes, she got up, walked to her sewing cabinet and pulled out a small envelope, worn, yellowed. "Your dad left this," she said. "Told me to hold it, just in case someone ever tried to take what was yours." I opened it slowly. Inside, a handwritten note in his blocky script. "If they ever try to erase her, remember, this house belongs to Velma." I read it twice before I said anything. "You're not the first," she added softly. "Your Aunt Eliza, they did the same to her, transferred her house while she was sick, said she wanted it that way. She didn't." I looked up. My voice didn't shake. "They don't just erase women," I said. "They inherit the tools to do it again." Aunt Caril nodded, eyes glassy. "Silence runs in our family like a bloodline." The next morning, I laid every paper I had out across the table. Forged documents, fake consent forms, logs, timestamps, everything. I organized them by date, by type, by the kind of betrayal they represented. Then I called an attorney, a woman referred to me by someone I met at the hospital. She wasn't from around here. That mattered. We met in a library meeting room. I didn't cry. I didn't explain too much. I just handed her the documents and watched her face change as she flipped through. "This isn't just civil," she said. "If what you're showing me is authentic, it could go federal." I nodded. "I'm not looking for revenge. I want something they can't rewrite." This wasn't about reclaiming a home. It was about restoring a fact. That afternoon, I drove past the house, not to get it back, but to see if it still remembered me. Belle's car was in the driveway. There were flower pots on the porch. A new smart lock blinked red at me from the doorframe. I didn't stop, didn't get out. Then I saw them, through the living room window. Belle. And a real estate agent. She wasn't just living in the lie, she was trying to sell it. Of course she was. She knew I was getting closer. If she sells it before the truth surfaces, she wins the story. So I turned the wheel and headed to the courthouse. The clerk didn't recognize me at first, but when I gave her my father's full name, her eyes shifted. She disappeared into the back and returned with a sealed envelope dated 8 years ago. Inside, a notarized letter. My father's handwriting again. "This house belongs to my daughter Velma. This letter remains valid until revoked. It has not been revoked. He said to give it to you if anything ever looked off," the clerk said. I closed my eyes. He saw this coming, and he left breadcrumbs. Even in death, he signed louder than anyone living. Back at the rental, I drafted a timeline. Not for drama, for court. Every signature, every IP address, every conversation I could back up. Then I placed the letter from Dad on top of the stack. The family was hosting another dinner in 2 days. No invitation for me, of course. Didn't matter. I wouldn't be walking in as their daughter. I'd be walking in as the evidence. They wrote me out. Now I'm the editor. That night, I looked over the guest list I managed to get from an old cousin who thought I still lived out of state. My name wasn't on it. I smiled. Good. That way they won't see it coming. The invitation wasn't meant for me. It came through a forwarded email from my cousin Sadie. Subject line read, "Family dinner, Belle's big year." It was sent to a list of about 30 relatives, everyone from third cousins to old church friends. I read the email twice before realizing what it was, and what it wasn't. My name wasn't anywhere on it. No one called, no one texted, no one asked if I was coming. No one even checked to see if I was still alive. It wasn't just a gathering, it was a celebration. Of her, of the lie. And they left me out like I'd never existed. I didn't cry, didn't yell, just printed the email, folded it neatly, and slid it into my purse. Being excluded isn't new, being ready for it is. The evening of the dinner, I parked half a block down, walked in from the dark, coat buttoned to the top, hair pulled back tight. No makeup, no expression. I knocked once. The door opened fast. Belle, with that smile she wore when she thought she was winning. And until she saw me, her face dropped. The room behind her went still, like someone pressed pause on the entire party. Conversations halted. Forks hovered midair. My mother turned from the buffet table and looked at me like I was a ghost. I walked in without asking. My boots squeaked on the wood floor. No one offered me a plate. The dining room was dressed up. Candles, folded napkins, printed place cards. I scanned the table. My name wasn't there. My photo wasn't on the wall. The same house I fought for, bled for, was now a stage for a story I never agreed to be cut from. I didn't sit. I waited. Then I reached into my purse and pulled out the envelope, the one with my dad's signature. I unfolded the letter slowly. Let the room hear the sound of truth opening. "This house belongs to Velma," I read, "no matter what else happens." The words echoed louder than I expected. Gasps, a cough. Someone set down their drink too hard. I laid the paper on the table, dead center. "He signed this before he died," I said calmly. "You forged mine after." No one spoke. He spoke louder from the grave than you did with a pen. I wasn't done. I took out the USB next, walked over to the TV, popped it into the side slot, turned it on. It blinked, loaded, played. No audio, just footage. Belle, walking into my hospital room, hoodie up, clipboard in hand. Another man in scrubs beside her. My hand, limp. Her hand, steady. She guided the pen. The line was signed. Silence cracked into whispers. One guest stood up and walked out. Belle turned, voice breaking. "You weren't going to make it. I was just preparing." "You didn't prepare," I said. "You plotted." I turned back to the table, slow. My mother stepped forward, voice shaking. "We thought it was what you wanted." I looked at her. "No. You thought I wouldn't wake up." A cousin whispered to someone, "This is going to ruin Belle." I looked straight at him. "She ruined herself. I'm just unburying the truth." Still, I didn't raise my voice, didn't cry, just gathered my papers, slid the USB back into my coat pocket. Then I walked toward the door. But at the threshold, I stopped. Turned to Belle. "You stole my house," I said. "But I came back for something bigger. You?" The phone didn't ring at 7 a.m. or 9 a.m. It rang at 11:17, just late enough in the day for the caller to pretend it was casual. It wasn't Belle, it was her lawyer. He didn't stumble or clear his throat. He was clean and calculated. "My client is willing to transfer the deed back quietly," he said, "in exchange for a mutual agreement not to pursue public or legal action. Not an apology, not a confession, a transaction." They weren't returning what they stole, I thought. They were trying to erase the evidence they took it. I didn't give him an answer, just told him I'd review it and hung up. Apologies aren't always admissions. Sometimes they're negotiations. Later that afternoon, I unlocked the front door with the key they couriered over. The house was empty. Not just furniture, everything. The walls were bare, paint smudged where photos used to hang. But a few things remained. A curtain I picked out years ago still hung crooked in the guest room. The floorboard near the kitchen still creaked when I stepped on it. I stood in that space for minutes before walking into the closet. There was one box left, unlabeled. Inside, a single photo. Family picnic. My face had been scratched out. Not torn, not folded. Scratched. A deliberate choice. I didn't take it. I left the box exactly where it was. They already took their version of the past. I'm not carrying it. I didn't reclaim the house to wage a war. I reclaimed it to stop the erasure. This wasn't their house to take. But it's my piece to keep. The town spoke in whispers, like they always do. Belle's name slid into awkward pauses at grocery stores, under breath at church socials. She tried to fight it, of course. Posted vague quotes about betrayal, told folks she was just misunderstood. Nobody bought it. She sent one final message. "I hope you're happy. You ruined everything." I didn't respond, but in my head I whispered, "I didn't ruin it." I revealed it. Some people can't handle being seen for what they did in the dark, and some of us were made for daylight. One Thursday, not long after I moved back in, Mom showed up on my porch. No warning, no baked goods or hug, just her and her shadow. She didn't ask to come inside. She stood there like the house had something to say she couldn't. "It was never supposed to be this way," she said. I didn't move from the doorway. "You don't have to admit it," I said. "I just need you to stop pretending it didn't happen." We talked for a while, the way strangers sometimes do when they used to share blood. She didn't apologize. I didn't beg her to. Closure doesn't always come with forgiveness. Sometimes it comes with distance. That night, I placed a folded beige napkin on the counter, the same kind they handed me on the hospital tray. The one I once thought meant they still cared. Now, it meant something else. They tried to bury me in that softness. I walked out of it on my own. I lit a candle. Not for anyone dead, for me. I ate dinner at my own table, alone, and it was the most full I've ever felt. This silence is mine now, and it finally feels like peace. Later, I cracked the window open and let the breeze in. Wichita Falls was still itself, quiet, slow, too hot for April. But it was mine again. I looked out, not behind me, ahead. They wrote my ending. I rewrote my beginning.